Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping right into what is probably the biggest global policy document of the year.
The 2025 Sustainable Development Goals Report.
Exactly. And this isn't just a routine check-in, right? This marks the 10-year anniversary since the 2030 agenda was adopted. We're at the midpoint.
It's a truly critical inflection point. So our mission today is, I think, to give you, the learner, a really quick but thorough understanding of where the world actually stands on these 17 goals.
Yeah?
We need to look honestly at the successes, but, more importantly, really drill down into the critical failures that are threatening this whole project.
And the overall headline, unfortunately, is, well, it's stark. If you take one thing away from this deep dive, it's the report's verdict.
A global development emergency.
That's the term they use. The progress assessment is, frankly, pretty dismal. Only 35% of the SDG targets are currently on track or making moderate progress.
Which is a pace that is entirely insufficient. I mean, nearly half of all the targets are just moving too slowly to meet that 2030 deadline. But the most alarming figure, the real sort of failure indicator, is that a staggering 18% of targets are now in reverse.
Yeah.
They've actually regressed. They're below the baseline we set back in 2015.
Wait, 18%? Nearly 1 in 5 targets are going backwards a decade in.
Exactly.
So that suggests the system isn't just idling. In some really critical areas, it's actively moving away from the goals. Okay, so let's unpack this. What are the forces that actually caused this emergency? And, where are the faint signs of hope that prove change is still possible?
Well, let's maybe start with those signs of hope, because I think they're crucial to remember. The decade since 2015, it has seen some important gains that show resilience.
Right. It's not all bad news.
Not at all.
The expansion of social safety nets, for instance, that feels like a massive foundational shift.
It really is. More than half the world's population now benefits from some form of social protection. That's up a full 10 percentage points over the decade.
And that kind of security is just fundamental for development, isn't it?
It's the bedrock. And we've seen measurable improvements in global health, too. New HIV infections, for example, are down 40% since 2010.
Wow.
And thanks to malaria prevention efforts, we're talking mosquito nets, better drugs, an estimated 12.7 million lives have been saved since the year 2000.
That's incredible. And then you have education and connectivity also opening up opportunities. An impressive 110 million more children and youth are in school now compared to 2015.
And the digital access, that's just skyrocketed. Internet connectivity has increased by, 70%? These are huge accelerators.
Absolutely.
And we can't overlook the structural shift in governance toward gender equality. Women now hold 27% of parliamentary seats worldwide. That's up from 22%.
So these are real, tangible shifts that prove progress is possible.
It is attainable, yes.
But, and this is a huge but, the report details how these gains have been met by these overwhelming interconnected headwinds that have just pushed everything off track.
Yeah. A cascading array of crises is how they put it. Conflicts, climate chaos, geopolitical tensions, and, ongoing economic shocks.
The statistics that illustrate these headwinds are, frankly, devastating. On poverty, over 800 million people are now trapped in what's defined as extreme poverty.
And that's under the newly revised International Poverty Line.
Right. And the climate reality is just accelerating faster than anyone predicted. 2024 was certified as the hottest year on record. It didn't just nudge the 1.5 degrees C threshold. It blew past it. We're sitting at about 1.55 degrees C above pre-industrial levels.
And that's compounded by the atmospheric reality, right? The carbon dioxide levels are the highest they have been in over 2 million years.
2 million years.
We're in completely uncharted territory, and that instability, it just feeds displacement.
And the human cost of that instability is just staggering. Over 120 million people have been forced from their homes.
120 million.
To put that in perspective for you, that's more than double the number we saw back in 2015.
And all of this chaos is being fueled by economic pressure. The global economy is squeezing the very countries that need to invest the most. Debt servicing costs in low and middle income countries. They had a record $1.4 trillion.
$1.5 trillion almost. That is an enormous amount of capital.
Yeah.
What is the implication of a debt figure like that?
Well, the implication is opportunity cost. It's that simple. That $1.4 trillion is capital that cannot be spent on building schools or funding health systems
Or providing that social protection we just celebrated.
Exactly. It's diverted to creditors. It creates this vicious cycle where countries just remain vulnerable.
So the debt issue is a clear failure of financing. But there's a second, maybe more invisible financing failure we have to talk about.
And what's that?
The data foundation itself. I mean, we can't even measure the depth of the climate crisis or the debt's impact or the poverty reversal without robust data.
That is a perfect transition. The report introduces this concept that data shouldn't be seen as a technical afterthought. It's essential infrastructure for development.
Like electricity or clean water.
Precisely. It underpins everything. You need data to track disease, to monitor climate impact, to allocate those scarce resources effectively.
And globally, we actually have made huge strides there. Back in 2016, when the SDG monitoring framework was set up, only a third of indicators had decent data coverage.
And now?
Now it's almost 70% with good coverage.
Yeah.
And critically, all 234 indicators have established methodologies.
So progress in the methodology, yes. But if you look at the actual real-world data collection, there are these persistent gaps that reveal what the report calls critical blind spots. 4 key goals are still lagging way behind. We're talking below 30% trend data coverage.
So which goals are we basically flying blind on?
Well, some of the big ones. Goal 5, that's gender equality. Goal 11, sustainable cities. Goal 13, climate action. And Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. These are often the most politically sensitive or just technically complex areas to measure consistently. And that lack of data means we can't really track progress or hold anyone accountable.
Which leads us to the extreme fragility of the funding for this essential infrastructure. We saw international support for data increase by 50% in real terms, hitting $875 million in 2022. That sounds great on paper.
It does, but that upward trend is now acutely under threat. We're anticipating an overall downward trend for total official development assistance ODA between 2023 and 2025.
And that's going to pull data funding down with it.
Right when we need it most.
And the concentration risk is genuinely worrying. We know that in 2022, just 9 funders provided something like 70% of all financial support for data.
9 funders for the whole world's data.
Yeah. The World Bank provided 26%, the U.S. was 14%, the Inter-American Development Bank chipped in 10%.
You're right to flag that risk. I mean, essentially, our entire global dashboard is running on a power grid where just 9 entities control the energy supply.
Right.
It makes the whole data system incredibly vulnerable to the political or financial whims of a handful of actors.
And we have a perfect and honestly a kind of scary aha moment case study for this.
Let's hear it.
The abrupt termination of funding for the Demographic and Health Surveys, the DHS.
The DHS. I mean, that is the global gold standard for tracking population health, demographics, all those critical social indicators in low and middle income countries.
Exactly. And the funding termination by USAID in February 2025, it just suspended these surveys. It's threatening the production of critical data for years.
And the data points we are losing are vital. The DHS data has been used for global reporting on 39 different SDG indicators since 2015.
39. But the reliance on it for sensitive social issues is what's truly astonishing.
It really highlights the vulnerability. Since 2015, 70% of the data points globally on contraceptive use.
That's SDG 5.6.1.
Right. And experiences of sexual violence, that's SDG 16.2.3, they came directly from the DHS.
So when that funding faucet just shuts off,
we instantly lose the ability to measure progress on some of the most sensitive indicators for human rights and gender equality. We're flying blind.
The report argues this volatility requires complete pivot. We have to shift away from this funder-driven, project-based model.
To move toward what?
Toward country-led, system-strengthening approaches.
That's crucial because the dependency is still so pervasive. Over 90% of household surveys in low-income countries still rely on external funding.
90%.
So until countries own and fund their own data infrastructure, we're going to keep having these massive blind spots whenever a crisis hits or a funder changes its priorities.
That really drives home just how vulnerable the invisible infrastructure is. Okay, let's pivot and look at some of the severe disparities the data we do have is revealing.
Let's do it.
Goal by goal.
Okay, starting with goal 1, no poverty. You mentioned the upward revision of the extreme poverty line to $3 a day. This is using 2021 Purchasing Power Parity, or PPP.
So for our listeners who might not track those conversions, how should we understand what that $3 PPP figure really means?
It's basically a mechanism to ensure that $3 can buy roughly the same basket of goods and services in, say, Malawi as it would in the United States. It gives a more accurate measure of deprivation than just using raw exchange rates.
Right. And that revised line resulted in an estimated 808 million people living in extreme poverty.
And the failure to protect those people is just so clear when you look at the social protection gap.
How big is the gap?
Well, low-income countries spend, on average, a minuscule 2.0% of their GDP on social protection. Just 2%.
And in high-income countries?
24.9%.
Wow.
That 23-point gap is the difference between a society that's resilient and one that collapses under the first shock.
And when we move to Goal 3, health, we see clear reversals. Tuberculosis is likely the leading cause of death from a single infectious agent again.
Responsible for 1.25 million deaths in 2023.
And malaria cases are rising too. We're up to 263 million cases in 2023. That's up from 226 million in 2015. It's a health crisis moving backwards.
And that failure is directly linked to inequality in care and just a massive workforce shortage. We have a projected global shortfall of 11.1 million health workers by 2030.
That capacity difference is staggering.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the human cost of that kind of shortage?
Well, the human cost is measured in basic access to life-saving care. You have to contrast the worker density. High-income countries have one health worker for every 64 people.
Okay, 1 for every 64.
In low-income countries, it's 1 for every 621 people.
621.
That immense difference in capacity means essential services, from maternal care to managing TD, are just not available for hundreds of millions of people.
And the disparities are just as sharp when you look at gender and work, which links Goals 5 and 8.
Mm-hmm.
The report highlights that women globally devote 2.5 times as many hours per day to unpaid domestic and care work as men.
Which is a fundamental structural barrier. I mean, that unpaid labor limits the time women can dedicate to the formal economy. It traps them in economic vulnerability.
And that's made so much worse by informal employment. It makes up 57.8% of the global workforce.
Almost 60%.
And when you look at the most vulnerable countries, it's nearly 9 in 10 workers in least developed countries in sub-Saharan Africa. They're all employed informally.
Which means no benefits, no security, no safety net.
Exactly. And this feeds directly into the youth disadvantage. 1 in 5 young people aged 15 to 24 are categorized as NEET.
Not in education, employment, or training.
Right. And alarmingly, young women are globally twice as likely to be NEET as young men. So those structural barriers, they start early and they just persist.
They do.
Finally, let's just touch on the profound paradox in climate finance under Goal 13.
Okay.
We established that 2024 was the hottest year on record, right?
Mm-hmm.
Signaling extreme urgency.
Mm-hmm.
Yet global fossil fuel subsidies, despite dropping a little bit in 2023, they remain nearly 3 times 2020 levels. We're talking an estimated $1.10 trillion.
It is genuinely difficult to reconcile that level of public spending. We're supporting the very source of the problem, when we are so critically off track on the 1.5-degree limit.
That failure to align the financing with the ambition, it just feels like the biggest obstacle.
It really is.
So what does all this mean for the next 5 years? We've heard a clear verdict of a development emergency. But the report does say transformation is still achievable.
It is, but only if we act decisively. You have to look for examples of accelerated action. Look at forest loss. Deforestation rates are declining in massive, ecologically critical areas like Indonesia and Brazil.
That's a huge win.
It is. Brazil cut deforestation in the legal Amazon by 50% in 2023, 50% in 1 year. That proves that political will, combined with targeted policy, it works. And it works immediately.
And to achieve that systemic change, the report identifies 6 critical SDG transitions that need concentrated investment.
Right. These are the pressure points: food systems, energy, digital connectivity, education, jobs and social protection, and climate and biodiversity.
So our core takeaway is that the urgency is now paramount. The next 5 years are decisive.
They are. And the true measure of progress, it isn't just in those high-level global averages, is it? It's in transforming the lives of those furthest behind.
The people in low-income countries living under that revised poverty line, lacking that social protection.
Exactly. And that transformation depends entirely on investing in that invisible infrastructure of resilient data systems. Without robust country-led measurement, you can't have effective policy.
And without effective policy, you can't have actual progress.
Which leads us to the final provocative thought for you to mull over.
Okay.
Given that the most vulnerable countries, the least developed countries, the landlocked developing countries, are the ones whose data systems are most dependent on this tiny group of external funders, how can global development possibly achieve true resilience if its foundational data infrastructure remains so financially fragile?
Think about that tension between national ownership and this international dependency as we race toward that 2030 deadline. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.